Hello, Damien Barrett with you on the round 17 version of Access All Areas, brought to you by OPSM. With me, as always on a Friday, Lee Matthews, four-time Premiership coach, player of the century, and also the man who's been creating plenty of headlines for We in the Media this week, North Melbourne coach Brad Scott. And we'll get straight into one of the issues that Brad's been talking about, Lee, that being the Jack Ziebell incident. It has now become known as, throughout the week, as his hit on Aaron Joseph last week. What's your take?
Well, too many weeks probably, but because it was sort of incidental, but it wasn't totally accidental to me.
Yep.
So I could understand why he was actually found guilty by the judiciary, and then it becomes a question of add-ons and take-offs and all that kind of stuff. Why he got the actual 4 weeks. So yeah, I put it in the unlucky category, but the protection of the head from anything but total. And accidental to me is if you both got your total eyes on the footy, that's accidental. So I could see why he was found guilty. Now, Brad, you obviously had a different view, but...
Yeah, very different. I think that, look, we counselled Jack Ziebell really strongly last year after he was suspended for his bump on Nick Riewoldt, and he ran past the ball there and made Nick his sole objective. You know, he wanted to make contact, and he certainly did that. And, you know, we counselled him and coached him strongly that the modern game, you can't do that. You can't target an opposition player. And the way we coached him was to keep his eyes on the ball at all time. And if he made the ball his sole objective, then he'd be okay. Now, he was adamant he made the ball his sole objective. The tribunal, the match review panel, the umpire all agreed. So I think it's a landmark decision for our game that everyone in a position of authority agreed that he made the ball his sole objective. He kept his eyes on the ball, and then there was contact as a result of that, but he was still suspended. So I think that's a concern in my view, because I think that's the way we coach young players, and that's the way coaches at all levels coach players.
One of the things, because one of the problems with all this kind of stuff is that, like, you're not allowed to protect yourself. This is the byproduct. What the rules of this case probably say is to protect yourself and cause some damage to another player. That's not a defence.
Yeah.
Which is strange. In other words, you've just got to go head first at the footy and hope like hell the other bloke doesn't do the same.
Well, the other option there Jack had is he could have stuck his knees and his elbow up to go for the ball, and in which case he may have struck Joseph in the jaw and broken his jaw with his elbow. Now, that would have been a far worse injury than Joseph suffered. So I think it's a concern. I think we've got to accept in our game that if we make the ball your sole objective and you've got your eyes on the ball, there is going to be incidental contact, because we do play a contact sport after all.
Did you expect this decision now to become precedent in the AFL and for every incident like it to be treated the same way?
Oh, I certainly hope not. I hope not. I hope there's a groundswell of public opinion that forces the AFL to change the wording of the rule, because in the rule with high bumping, if you choose to bump and you hit the head, there's no defence. But if you've got your eyes on the ball and you're genuinely contesting the ball, that's also in the rules. But there's this other little wording in the rule that says, unless you had a reasonable alternative. Well, there's always a reasonable alternative. You could not contest the ball. But I don't think we want to see that go out of the game.
So if it is policed that same way, you're fearful of where the game is headed by way of its umpiring? Yeah,
genuinely concerned about that, because I think that at all levels of football, coaches should be teaching young players to keep their eyes on the ball and genuinely contest the ball. Yep. And if players do that, all players do that, I think we've got a great game.
Yep. Brad, just the tweet situation with your player Drew Petrie and also the Geelong player James Kelly. We'll just take you back and have a look at these now. And look, advice for Jack Ziebell. This is from Drew Petrie. Stop being so courageous and playing footy hard the way it's meant to be played. Please turn it into a softie. Another one. I've lost enough sleep already tonight over that decision. Got a sore neck from shaking my head so much. Time for bed. Reasonably innocuous. The AFL Centre, please explain, as they have to James Kelly. I was going to tweet how Ziebell, needed a spell check there, James getting 4 weeks was a mare of a decision, but decided not to, so I don't get in trouble. Smart cow, smart. Do you expect the AFL to come down hard, and should it on this occasion, on those instances?
I don't think so, but I said to Drew Petrie, this is the reason, amongst the many reasons. One of the reasons I don't have a Twitter account, because I'd have to have $100,000 in a bank account ready to pay all the fines. Because what Twitter and social media do these days is it leaves you vulnerable to any spur of the moment thought or feeling you might have. I think all of us need to take a deep breath. I think the North Melbourne Footy Club were really disappointed with the decision, but in the cold light of day, I think we've been pretty measured in our response. So what we talk to our players about social media is you've got to be measured in the things you say and be aware that it's publishing and it's public for all to see.
Yep.
So I don't think the AFL, they've asked for a please explain. Clearly the AFL are very sensitive at the moment. We saw that during the week with Adrian's response to Paul Connor's comments. So I think
you might get one for even talking about it publicly yesterday.
I'd welcome the opportunity to explain myself again. I think that we've got to strike the balance between players speaking their minds, but I think the one thing we cannot be critical of is umpires. I think we've got to protect umpires at all costs.
Yep.
I think that their decisions are final, and that's another thing you're taught as a junior footballer: accept the umpire's decision. But I think with the Ziebell decision, I think this is a landmark decision. So for the good of the game, I'd like to see a bit more discussion around that.
But we'll move on after this one. But you're not prone to be saying strong things as you have this week too publicly. I mean, you say a lot of things as footy clubs do behind the scenes. But yesterday being a Thursday after a weekend game, or a Friday game as it was, I mean, you thought about this for a long time and you decided to come out. And even this morning, you're saying again some equally strong things. Is the AFL a bit too precious in how it handles what people say against it?
My attitude with AFL footy is if you can't handle criticism, whether it's true or false, or whether it's unfounded, you're in the wrong industry. Yeah. So I think in Adrian's case, he was criticised unfairly. Yep. AFL coaches, in their view, are probably criticised unfairly all the time. I can't recall an AFL coach ringing their lawyer to pursue a defamation claim against someone for criticising them. And there's unfounded criticism all the time. So I'd hate to think that we're going to get so pedantic and so sensitive that we're going to get lawyers involved every time someone says something you don't like.
Really, total support of the umpires. You can't criticise the umpires. We understand that recruitment of umpires, that's the reason. I mean, you should be able to make your comments, I reckon, about tribunal decisions. Yep. That shouldn't be a no-go zone.
Well, I think the AFL
comment by AFL people.
Look, and I was measured. We spoke to Patrick Keane before my press conference because I wanted to make sure that the AFL didn't take that I wasn't overstepping the mark. Yep. I wasn't saying anything that was.
Well, that's unusual in itself, isn't it? The forecasting.
It is because it's the environment we live in,
yeah.
and the AFL clearly take these things fairly seriously. So, and Patrick made it very clear that you can disagree with the decision that the tribunal made, but you just can't be over the top in your criticism of them, and I didn't think I was.
Sure. Well, those tweets weren't either. So those tweets, they might have asked for please explain, but surely they're not going to get fined for that because they weren't they were just disappointed with the decision. Yep. They weren't being abusive about it.
Yep. Guys, we'll come back to North in a moment, but this round of footy league, round 17, has got blockbusters everywhere. Even the lowly teams are involved in some form of blockbuster in inverted commas. Take us through it.
Well, what I love the most, let's go through it. Just my picks. I would go for Essendon tonight. I'd go for Collingwood. Good go for the Crows. But the Swans, St Kilda interests me. The Swans St Kilda are 8th, the Swans are 1st. It's in Sydney, so you probably tip the Swans. But really, St Kilda have got a really good chance. So when you've got the top 8, and then, Brad, you're in 9th against Richmond or 11th, this year it looks like that top 10, I mean, you could be playing the Swans this week at 9th position and think you've got a pretty good chance of winning. Great competition. Fantastic.
What about the Gold Coast Suns and Lions, Lee? Has that captured the imagination of South East Queensland?
Well, I don't think so. I think the Lions are always pretty keen to knock the little brother on the head, so I reckon they'll be pretty keen to go down to Metricon and win. So I think the Lions will win that game. The
defensive generals, the ageing defensive generals, Lee. Geelong's Matty Scarlett against Essendon's Dustin Fletcher, 33 years of age, 37 years of age. Who is faring better as we speak?
Well, I've got a feeling that Justin Fletcher, I mean, it just happens that they play tonight, obviously, Geelong and Essendon, and they're still probably the coordinators of the two defences. And Dustin Fletcher, in his 20th year at 37 years of age, I reckon he's probably going a little bit better than Matthew Scarlett, to be honest, just at this point in time. I mean, don't think there's much doubt he'll play on. Matthew Scarlett, it just doesn't seem to be having the same influence on the games from what I've seen anyway over this last month or so.
How do you see it, Brad? Do both go again? Or?
Oh, well, I think both clubs would like them to go again, and their form suggests that they should. But I think that largely defences are protected somewhat by the team's midfield. So I think that Essendon's midfield is going really well at the moment. They're in good form. They've won a lot of games. I think Geelong have really suffered from a lot of injuries this year, and I think if you add back in Menzel, Varco, Mitch Duncan, who has been there, but it adds a completely different dimension to the Geelong midfield, and I think when they're there, probably their defence looks better as well. So I've always believed that a strong defence is important, but if you've got a good midfield, it certainly helps your defence.
How do you handle it? I mean, Geelong have been starting slowly. Just the principle we're talking about here. You can make it a self-fulfilling prophecy if you talk about it too much within a footy club, but you know you've got to start better. The coaching challenge of handling that particular problem.
It's a real intangible because, I mean, one of the things you do as a coach is you look at things contest by contest. And, the start, in theory, should be no different to the end. I mean, every contest should be treated on their merit. So, but I think that if it becomes a pattern, then, we've had the opposite problem. I mean, we've been accused of finishing games poorly and fading out late in games. Now, to me, that's been simply a product of making some pretty fundamental errors. But you put them all together and it does add up to some pretty damning evidence. So no doubt Geelong will address that. They're a super side, and I'd be surprised if they don't come out firing tonight.
Brad, Geelong Footy Club last week flew into Adelaide, coach, captain, senior player, to go and speak with Travis Boak. They got caught by TV cameras. Footy Show last night revealed that you, Andrew Swallow, and the chief scientist there, the medical scientist there, Steve Saunders, also did the same thing with Travis Boak, but no TV cameras there. Where are you at with Boak?
Oh, look, we've simply had contact with Travis and his management, who have indicated to us that Travis is torn between returning home to Victoria and staying with Port Adelaide. Now, we made it really clear that, of course, we would be interested in Travis should he choose to return to Victoria, but we still consider him a Port Adelaide player. So he's a Port player. He's contracted there, and we would only be interested should he choose to return to Victoria. So we've put an option to him that we think is a really viable one, and we think we've got a really good case. But that will only progress should Travis decide to part ways with Port Adelaide.
Yep. And the concept of clubs meeting with players within a season, do we just have to get our heads around this and harden up on the outcomes of those conversations as an industry?
Oh, I think it's a funny one. I mean, you look at all the players who have changed clubs. Do we seriously think that those clubs haven't spoken to those players at some point? Do you think that clubs would not do their due diligence when they do a trade for a player to bring him into a club? So I've heard other clubs comment on Geelong's conduct. I think it defies or beggars belief to think that those clubs wouldn't have spoken to players during seasons before they got those players to those clubs. So I think it has been going on. Geelong didn't advertise the fact that they were going to Adelaide. It just so happened that someone leaked that information and the television cameras turned up. So I don't think they marched into Adelaide. I thought they tried to fly in under the cloak of darkness, to be honest. But it has been going on. It's been going on for a long time, and will continue in this new era of free agency.
I reckon they lifted the bar on aggressive recruiting by going to Boak City with two really good players and the coach. I mean, normally it's a bit more subterfuge. You meet behind the scenes as you guys did. So this one was really up front.
Well, look, the fortunate thing for us is Travis happened to be in Victoria at the time. So he's playing now. He wasn't playing at the time when we spoke to him. So that made things a lot easier. But clubs do an enormous amount of due diligence. There is no way that you would bring a player into your club without getting to know him very well, without knowing his background, without getting to know his character. And I think that's critical, and it's very difficult to do that if you can't speak to him.
One line answer, do you think you'll stay or go?
Oh, look, I think my gut says that the possession's 9/10 of the law, and I think he's a terrific young man. He's extremely impressive, and I think he's a fiercely loyal person. I think he's legitimately torn between really close family ties in Victoria and loyalty to Port Adelaide. But my sense is that he'll probably stay, but I've been wrong before.
Brad, you mentioned the term landscape changer before, referring to the Zeeble incident. A landscape changer for North's season this year was arguably the Launceston game, 115-point loss to Hawthorn. I lost only one game since by 3 points to West Coast. Bit of swagger about North since that happened, and even to the point where last week, where Judd did what he did to Adams, that North players came in and remonstrated with an icon of the game. That sort of stuff, is that great for you as coach to see?
Oh, I think well, you look at the vision there, it's Andrew Swallow is not a player who reacts like that given normal circumstances. So, but look, I think there's certainly, in any team, you want players to support each other. You want players to stand up for each other. So, and in that vision, we had two young players, Robbie Tarrant and Jamie McMillan, flying the flag for their team. But, I think that you look at successful teams over a period of time, and almost all of them have been very supportive of their teammates and stand up for each other when it's required.
Yep. Yes or no? Petrie play this weekend against Richmond?
We think yes. He trained reasonably well yesterday.
And
still
Adams?
got enough time. Yeah, Adams trained and we've named them. We think they'll play, barring any
Sure.
unforeseen circumstance in the
Yep.
in the meantime.
Brad, time for the result from our OPSM poll of last weekend, where we asked, is the AFL season too long? A whopping 82% said, no, it's not. The season isn't too long. 18% think it is. Brad, thanks for coming in. It's been a big week for you, and thanks for wrapping it up on Access All Areas today with us.
Thanks, Damon. Thanks, Lee.
And thanks to you too, Lee. And you'll be back next Friday, and I'll be back on Monday with Luke Darcy for the post-round 17 version of Access All Areas. Enjoy the weekend on what promises to be a huge one for all of us in footy. See you later.